Okay, welcome this afternoon, June 26th, for our council time. It is 1 o'clock. Let's have a roll call.
Councillor Young?
Here.
Councillor Belcott?
Here.
Councillor Bowerman?
Present.
Councillor Marshall?
Here.
Chair Meviji?
Present. Okay, amendments to the agenda.
Okay, yes, I have a couple amendments. The first one is the clerk discussion. I would like to move that one directly after the minutes, so it would be the new 4.2. So just rearranging that order.
I'm sorry, so you just want to move it up?
Yeah, to have that discussion prior, just after the minutes are considered. And then the next item would be to add the freight rail dependent use RFP pursuant to the discussion yesterday as the new 4.3. And then we'll move forward with the rest of that one. Let me look.
Okay, the railroad dependent would be addressed during new business?
It would be under old business right after the clerk discussion, because we have talked about the freight rail dependent use. That is an old business item.
Okay. Seems new, but.
There's one,
And then
one little
is
amendment that
Heritage
you
Farm
suggested.
4.4? Is Heritage Farm 4.4?
Yes, Heritage Farm would then follow after that, correct? And then the, yes.
Okay, well, you'll remind me when we get there, but it's just a rearranging. Okay, any objection to those amendments? Hearing none. Executive sessions, I just want to double check on that. We still have 3 for about 30 minutes total. Yes.
And there is potential after action.
Okay, public comment on agenda items only. Do we have any in the room?
Lisa Leotet?
Thank you for taking time today for addressing the agricultural conservation overlay for the 78th Street Heritage Farm, or better known to me as the Port Farm. This historical land is important to protect by this conservation overlay. It was Social Security, Port Farm style, before Social Security existed. There are 20 men who died while living and attempting to work at the Port Farm that are buried in the Marble Mount Cemetery, or Port Farm Cemetery, on the southwest end of the historic property. There are close to 200 more buried there that include folks that did not have any identification at the time of death and are simply buried as unknowns. Still, there are more buried folks whose families did not have the cash, about $30, to be buried to pay to the county, and whose families carried up a loved one in the blanket in the middle of the night to dig down 1.5 feet, like all the graves we might call them, with a mound of dirt and a metal marker for those who paid, as was provided by Clark, with an E back then on Clark County. Then the land was about a place when one was too old or too sick to care for the homestead, or if a person simply fell upon hard times. It did not work out so well as an experiment to work the land, according to the reporting from the Vancouver Independent newspaper in 1898, as residents there needed a lot of medical attention and care. Yet 20 men toiled and died there, trying to provide as best they can for themselves and their families living there. To me, the land is more about the people of that time and the history of what life was, the lessons of the day, and about how our government cared and continues to care for its peoples. Today, there is ongoing agricultural activities that WSU Vancouver helps, and maybe this gives us a reminder about learning about how we got where we are and why we live the way we do at this place. It's the study of us as humans and our place in an ever-changing world here in Vancouver. Without this remembrance and your conservation easement, we might become like a Port Farm that many of us know in another way. It was called Hillside Farm, a poor farm used from 1870 to 1910 that many of us today know better as the Oregon Zoo. There is a plaque. That is all that remains now there of this history in the elephant viewing area. 8 buried remains have been found by those animals and the elephants there. You are reading a copy that's been distributed for you to consider as you make this important decision today to protect our poor farm cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we have Carmen De Leon.
It has to be on, right? You can hear me? Yeah, I was here earlier and I told people about my disability. So I prefer to look at the beautiful surroundings than this way so I won't get triggered again on purpose. I'm talking about the minutes of June 12th, minute 12, and it was spoken, whatever, in this chamber. And we're talking about the proclamations. They had a proclamation for Joe Tilley, the Historical Foundation, the Treatment Center Month, Transit Center Month, Community Action, and even the certificate that they gave out to some people for great construction. But what we submitted for Independence Day was obviously pretty much gravely insulted by what they did with it. And then they actually were proud to proclaim it when, you know, it's just old news. But anyways, I'd rather not get triggered because this is what the original said. Whereas in the day of our Lord, 1776, Congress declared its freedom from the Great Britain, but their colonials are free and independent states and are absolved by the British Crown, whereas Congress approved and the actual Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, and in September 1787 drafted the in secret by the delegations of the constitutional government during the summer of 1887, establishing the government of the United States and guaranteeing our right to abolish any government or alter them if they become destructive, and institute a new government. And now, therefore, keeping with the rich heritage and patriotism of the historic largest celebration this side of the Mississippi at the Vancouver Barracks, we shall, I guess I'm not going to proclaim it because, like I said, they took our names off and then had the audacity to claim it for themselves, which is okay. You know, I can do that too. That's what plagiarism is. Anyways, in Clark County, as a citizen, we do hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Amen. And that's what the original proclamation said. They switched it all up and took our names off, but whatever. Hey, man, if you guys need the attention, go for it. I feel sorry for you.
Anyone else in the room for comments? How about online?
We have
2 online?
caller. Please unmute yourself and go ahead with your comments.
This is Kimberly Goheen-Elvin, Patriot and Life Citizen of Clark County, Washington. Mentioning, Mr. Medvedji mentions fireworks went on for quite a long time, speaking about with a gathering of citizens, speaking as if we never had an organized, safe display of illuminations of fireworks. And I'm going to put on record again that I did come up with that idea of the proclamation that you are taking credit for, that Mello has just spoken about. But I want to mention about the fireworks. You're following what I believe is a takedown of America that stops people from gathering, and even though you're saying it, you've had years to put back the greatest display of independence this side of the Mississippi River. that was in the proclamation also. You did not put that in there. I think citizens need to know why you did not put the exact written, legally submitted proclamation that we put in, and why you did what you did, taking all the glory. Now, the glory does not go to me when I do my work. I give all glory to God, and I pray for his protection, and I wear his armor. But you guys have plagiarized, and this will not end. I'm going to be bringing this up every time I can. Also, I'm opposed at adding or making a decision today with adding the freight rail that unelected Kathleen Otto put in. Citizens need more time to talk about this because that freight rail is a big no-no for the citizens of Clark County, Washington, USA. So I'm very much against the fact that Mr. Medvedji tries so hard that he's been working on getting a gathering for people. Well, for God's sake, we had it for decades. It was well known around the world. It brought in people to visit and the display of gathering and independence. And you took away our Independence Month, of which you'll give to, the pride or the people, the poetry groups, but not the people that want patriotism to show, because you're not out for that. You actually want to quash the people. You do not want patriotism. You want us to kind of go away and so you can carry about your business. I'm telling people right now, the recall is right on the horizon for this council, I want to also say this council is the same as the Board of Health, which I find not proper in my opinion, but so we'll see. Also, I want to mention that I see that on community events, that the 4th of July events, it says that there's 4th of July events across Clark County. I'd like to know where they are. Where are they? Other than what people do for their own
thank you. Your
independence.
time is up. We have others online.
One more. Doug Lasher, please go ahead with your comments.
My name is Doug Lasher. I serve as Clark County Charter Review Commissioner for the first review of the charter, and the Charter Review Commission decided after careful deliberation to keep all positions elected. Since this is under the old business on your agenda, I have some questions which I assume the council has already discussed and has answers, making the county clerk an appointed position rather than an elected position. My questions are the following. Why is the council bringing this county structural governance issue up now? Are there problems or policies in the clerk's office that you're trying to fix? Why would the council want more responsibilities under the county manager, who has enough responsibilities on her plate now? Especially when I have read some councilors do not want to give more authority to the county manager position. What would the citizens gain by adding another department head? Would they gain more accountability, checks and balances between the prosecutor, judges, and sheriff? Would it be cheaper salary or financial savings? Why do you want less accountability for the citizens? Why is a permanent employee better than someone performing the job, having term limits every 4 years to prove that they should be rehired? How can you make sure a department head, as an equal, standing between the judges and the sheriff and the prosecuting attorney when elected officials are elected by the citizens? I look forward to your analysis and answers. Thank you.
Okay, no others? All right, that concludes public comment. We go to old business 4.1, minutes from June 12.
I move approval. I second.
Thank you. Further discussion, comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. And so you want to move the charter amendment for the county clerk as 4.2.
Correct.
are you going to be doing the presentation? And
No, I'm going to invite our clerk up. This was briefly discussed last week during council time during the policy updates, and council, and this was 2 weeks ago, I believe. Council wanted to actually hear from the clerk directly on his thoughts as well as pros and cons of either keeping it as an elected official or potentially doing a charter amendment to make that unelected. So Scott Weber is here, our clerk. So at this time,
Okay.
I would.
Super, and thanks for coming on such short notice and kind of as an introduction and to somewhat answer the question that was just posed by the speaker. You know, no one's made any decisions whatsoever. There have been just preliminary discussions as a result of what we perceive some friction, different processes between the district court and the Superior Court. It came to light when we were looking at the judicial assistants and how they were performing different roles in the different courts, and the conversation kept coming up about clerk support and whether judicial assistants were doing clerk work. And so the discussion came up, and been researched by our policy analysts that, you know, it's about a 50-50 split roughly throughout the state. Where I had come from before, it was just an internal process within the court. The court managed the clerk's operations. And so the idea is to look at the best possible model and get your thoughts of it with an open mind to make it more efficient, both from a budgeting point of view, from a full-time staffing point of view, to have uniform procedures for the entire court, not just for the lower court or the higher court. So in any case, I think most of those questions are the ones that were just posed by the caller. So we're anxious to hear, what I gathered from the other four counselors, they don't have an idea about how the court operates, so they're really interested in hearing what you have to say.
So on the statement on the 50-50 split, it's actually 10%. There's 4 counties that have appointed clerks. There's more charter counties out there, but as far as appointed clerks, it has a dual role. There's the clerk of the court, and there's also the other side of it, the county clerk, as far as dealing with the actual citizens. I do believe that having this independent and representing the people is important. I originally ran on the fact that to be appointed, but after understanding the responsibilities and the mandated duties, I felt that the clerk should be independent. And dealing with several different counties, when the clerk is split into 2, then they have 2 masters. They have the court side of it, and then my example would be in Pierce County currently. They had one of the worst financial audits that they've had in the past, and working with that clerk, she's been newly appointed over the last 2 years, and she's been frustrated on how inefficient the system is, because at the point is there's nobody that's directing the clerk's functions that happen. So I do feel that the independence is huge. I know last year when I came to you asking for more employees, and we have 1 manager for 46 people, that we needed more structure. And so I just kind of feel that the solution is a replacement instead of, the help that I asked for. We have a 12-judge coming, and I've pretty much been told that there wouldn't be an employee that would be ongoing. We have 2 positions that are currently open that they're transitional and clerks to fill, but what we need, what we're going to ask for in the 25 budget is we're going to ask for a manager and the progressive model for staffing. That way I can move my staff up. So during the pandemic, when we were not able to hire, we were 13 clerks short. So I know how to run on a skeleton crew, It's just that I was asking for some relief. Currently now, we're at about the 2-year mark of all of our employees, so the level of knowledge is up there. And if the trajectory stays the same, that we're not going to have a disruption, in available labor. And we have happy employees with the pay adjustment that the county went through. I feel that we're in a great place to continue developing the processes that we've already put in place.
So questions from council. Now's your time.
Okay, I'll start out. Thanks so much for being here. One thing that has come up in the ECHO meetings and in Community Homelessness Organization, and maybe it was Law and Justice, but the release of inmates after hours, and some of them may be homeless or difficulty finding services at that hour. And I don't think we got a clear answer, so I'm wondering about if there's paperwork that needs to be provided to the jail staff, if that is being provided in a timely way, or if there could be improvements, or what might be some of the difficulty with that.
So I know there's one huge incident where somebody was held longer than they had. I did provide that information to Kathleen. There has been a few people that have been saying it's the clerk's the one not doing it. So we've gone back through, we send those documents over at the end of the day, and we have a record of it, and we have passed those on. So they moved the first appearance and arraignment to after lunch. So it's really down to the end of the day where there's a crunch to get things done. But our staff stay there. I've had the jail call me on a holiday Monday looking for documents, where then we're scrambling to log in to send them the file that they already have. The jail has asked us to edit our minutes to release somebody, which is not appropriate. We have to release somebody off of an order. We're the middleman, we're the fix-it. We're the one when the prosecutor doesn't put something correctly in there, or the judge puts the wrong date. We're usually the ones that are making the contact to go fix that document, because it is the document that is today, and it's a Scribner error, but we can't release it. So it's really easy to say it's the clerk, but we're the middleman on the processing, and we're the ones that make sure that it does get to the jail, because it is important that nobody gets held longer than they should. As far as the release time, that part's out of our control. I think that's by moving the arraignment from the morning to the afternoon. I think that has created a disruption all the way across the board. But that is the Superior Court decision.
And when did that change occur from moving from the morning to the afternoon?
March of this year, excuse me.
March just this year?
Yes, we had the conversation, I think it was for a year prior with the stakeholders, but they'd made that decision last year, but then I think the launch was March, if I remember correctly, Scott.
And I assume there were good reasons for that to happen, but I think what's difficult about this is there's so many components that are all intertwined, and it's hard to tease out just one component when there's all these other factors that play into it. Thank you, Scott.
Thank
Is that all your questions? And my takeaway from that discussion with the stakeholders was the PA went out, and basically they didn't feel they had the time in the morning to be prepared for a morning in custody counter, which
Chair, please talk into your mic. We can't hear you.
which most jurisdictions do. So whether those are good reasons or not, I don't know. But anyway,
and we would have employees start, at 5 in the morning to make sure that we're coordinated with them. I mean, that was a process in itself. I think it worked well. It's tough to have only one person come in at 5 for security reasons, safety.
other questions by council? Most of them are online. Michelle, Karen, Glenn, do you have questions?
Scott,
I understand that at one time you did feel that the position should be appointed, and what made, and you've changed in that regard. What made you change your perspective on that, and why?
So it happened actually right away. One of the things is working with my Clerks Association. I've been on the board for the last decade. Gaining the understanding and the responsibilities of the mandated duties are probably the biggest thing to having it independent elected. You know, it does put a lot of weight on your shoulders, and you know, you definitely feel like you have a lot of eyes looking at you and a lot of expectations. So every 4 years, I have to reapply for my job, and depending how I did the past 4 years, I feel that is really answering to the people.
Thank you.
Okay. Karen, does that conclude your questions?
It does. Thank you.
Lynn or Michelle?
I got a question for staff, if that's okay, appropriate at this time.
Please.
So I was hoping to get kind of a rundown of what the known or anticipated benefits would be to going forward with this charter amendment.
I think Scott already addressed that by sharing his view on the independence. It's a reporting structure difference. It's an oversight difference. Similar, I'd say kind of similar to the jail, where there is a different type of accountability. But as Scott mentioned, you know, he has accountability to the community as well who votes for that position.
Maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm not quite understanding the answer, but I was asking like what the overall benefit would be to making it a non-elected, making it an appointed position. Is that what the answer was?
Part of the answer is the same. It's just a different oversight. The law and justice system includes elected and non-elected heads of those systems, and it's crucial that all parties, regardless if they're elected or non-elected, are at the table to ensure that we're meeting mandates by law and being as efficient as possible and taking care of those who are in our custody.
Thank you.
So I'm just kind of sensing that there isn't a whole lot of interest in pursuing this. I mean, we do have 3 statewide initiatives coming before the people. We have a few that we're putting on ourselves. It's a lot for the public to deal with. Am I wrong in that, or are there 3 counselors who want to move this forward? Because obviously we're on a pretty tight timeline if we are to try to put this before the people to consider the change.
Fair.
Yeah, go ahead, Glenn.
You know, I wanted to thank Scott for coming today. It's the first opportunity we've had to hear from him. I think that it's a subject that is worthy of further discussion. You know, I think there's a lot of unknowns at this point for me, and I wouldn't support putting it on the ballot this particular time, but I wouldn't necessarily close the conversation, but I think I'd rather encourage more conversation and discussion around it.
Fair enough. Do others feel the same way? Sue?
Yes, thank you. I feel the same way, and I guess I was thinking, and I think we've put you in a very difficult position to come and try to provide pros and cons. If there could be some independent review looking at pros and cons, looking at what other counties are doing, I don't think we have really all of the information to make a decision. on this. It's a very important role. I appreciate your dedication to it, but I'd say I think it's premature, at least.
Anything, Karen, Michelle?
No, I just hope that by the virtue of the invitation to come to council, Scott, that you don't feel that there is a push in any personal way. It is simply looking at job structure, and that's my understanding of the impetus for the discussion in the first place. So I just want you to feel secure in that regard.
All right, thank you.
Any input, Michelle?
No, I feel a lot of the same way that Councilor Marshall's comments. I'd like to see more data before making any decision. And since it is such a tight time crunch, I just, I would like to have more information.
Okay, fair enough. So my general sense is from the previous conversations is that communication is improving between the Superior Court and District Court and the clerk's office. And, you know, we'll always be saddled with tough priority decisions budget-wise. So it doesn't sound like it's completely off the table, but for this year, I don't see the interest. And quite frankly, if we don't have a strong interest, I don't think the public will, unless we're completely out of tune with our districts.
I do want to add that.
Yes, please.
I do see that the state is looking at going to a unified court system, and that is on the radar of our Clerks Association and how that transitions, because all of the same functions have to happen, but they happen differently. So I know that our group is exploring it, but that I see that is one of the priorities of the state Supreme Court. So
once again, my personal thanks for you coming with such short notice. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I think that concludes that. Did we want to move the railroad dependent next, or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Good afternoon, councillors. For the record, Oliver Ojako. With me is Jose Alvarez, our land use program manager, and we also have our legal counsel here. Councillors, what I will be doing this afternoon is just more of an informational discussion with council, but before I do that, I have an agenda that I would like to follow. You can go to the next slide.
So I'm not clear on what we're doing. I thought we were just going to talk about the language that we wanted to add with the scope of work for the next RFP to include the buildable lands model. What, you planned something different?
Buildable lands model. So this is, I
think it
believe,
was land for jobs.
Lands, yeah,
It
lands
is for land for job, and that's why I wanted to just follow the agenda that I put together. If you can allow me, I will focus on the direction from yesterday's meeting, the tentative timeline for new RFP, focusing on land for jobs, and some observations. So if we can go to the next slide. What I heard from the council yesterday was to terminate the current request for proposal and reissue a new RFP, which will include land for jobs. Next slide. So councillors, here's the tentative timeline for a new RFP. Again, as I stated earlier, this is just for informational discussion, and then hopefully council will have questions for us. The earliest an RFP can be issued is July 24th. And this is the information we got from purchasing. That is the earliest a new RFP can be issued.
May we ask a question at this point? Why is it a month ahead before that can be issued?
Yes, so Councilor Bowerman, we actually are behind 6 months or more on releasing RFPs because the complexity of getting them out, and we do 3 a week, and we have 1.5 FTE that's doing that for the entire county. So this, because they had only 2 on the 24th, we were able to sneak in on that date without bumping another solicitation that has been planned.
Thank you,
And why is that? There's just the addition of a few words.
Because we have legal notices that we have to put out for a certain time frame, and we have to advertise it twice. And it's not just amending the current one because it already closed, so it's completely issuing a brand new one, even with just a few amended words.
So with that, councillors, it would take us at least 1 month to advertise. And given our current processes and timeline, it will take at least 6 weeks for selection, review, and contract negotiation and execution, putting us close to October 4th. And after that, we are looking about 2 weeks for contract approval by council, putting us out to October 22nd, and project kickoff is likely to be in November. Just want to provide this tentative timeline given our current normal processing time. Next slide.
So I want to add a little bit more detail or ask more detail on that 6 weeks evaluation. I mean, if we only get 1 or 2, it will take 6 weeks to evaluate the respondents. Can we shorten that? I mean, we're trying to expedite the process. You know, if we had all of a sudden everyone came from out of the woodwork nationally and we had 20 or 30 respondents, I would say that it would take 1.5 months to review them and score them. We do a fairly faster job in mental health sales tax, the ARPA grant rounds, and we can generally get through them much quicker than this.
So that's for the review, the contract negotiation, and the execution of the contract. So it's not just the selection process, it's all of those 3 combined.
And the last one we got, I recall that we didn't get any. We have to go out or extended the timeline because no one responded. I'm hoping that if we go out again, that many or other consultants will chime in. I don't know. But Jose is correct. This is both the selection, review, contract negotiation, and execution. If we decide to, which is what we did the last time, assemble internal county staff to review and help us in the selection process, councillors, it's often difficult to get everyone, but we can prioritize this. I'm not making an excuse, but it's very hard to get everyone we ask to participate to have the same schedule, but they do sacrifice. The last time we did involve the county manager, our legal counsel, and Jordan. To get them all calendars line up is a challenge, but this is just an estimated timeline. Bear with me. So the project kickoff will likely be, like I said, sometime in November. Focusing on land for jobs, which was the direction that the council provided, one of the things that struck me was that the council I believe there was a memo dated May 21st,
Okay, so
2024.
now you're questioning our policy decision, yes?
No, Council, I'm not. What that memo says is,
We know about this. We voted on this. This is a county-wide initiative, and we don't know if they're going to get this grant.
so the reason I'm bringing it up, Councilor, if I may, is because that says to hire an economic development consultant to review potential industrial site in the county, including sites located along the PGR Railroad. So my reasoning for bringing it up is that it is proper to know whether they got the grant or not. If not, it is the same request that the council is asking us to include in this revision to the RFP. Next slide, please. As I stated earlier, councilors, bear with me. This is more informational to the council. Whatever direction you provide us, we will follow. What I would like the council to be aware of is that the freight rail dependent uses, as you know, only applies to lands outside the urban road boundary, in this case, rural and resource lands. The council is aware that based on the job allocation that you approved, we and the cities have completed the job allocation. So the cities are beginning to come up with how to provide for that job allocated to them. I will also present to the council that the vacant buildable lands model is based on employment land within the urban road boundary. There is very little or no commercial or industrial land designated outside the resource areas. We, when I say we, the county staff in my shop are now in phase 2 of implementation of the freight rail dependent uses. And what that entails is the adoption of the development regulations within the existing FDR overlay, which we can do at any time outside of the periodic plan update. Next slide. I think I want to stop there. I have other information I wanted to share with the council, but if you go to the next slide, let me just do that quickly. The council may have seen this before. Again, my comment and remark this morning is only for informational purposes. This map is that I'm going to share with the council is the entire length of the 33-mile radius of the railroad. From what you're seeing here is from the urban road boundary, the northern edge of the Vancouver urban road boundary to the southern edge of the Battleground urban road boundary. If you were to limit adjacency to 500 feet of the railroad, that's what this map is showing. It's showing you how many acres, zone agriculture, and other various land use designation in the rural area. Between this Vancouver urban road boundary to the southern boundary of Battleground, it totals about 988 acres, 0.4, that will be impacted. Go to the next slide. This one is from Battleground to the southern edge of the town of Yakult, UGA, again, maintaining only 500 feet on both sides of the railroad. You can see all the land that will be impacted, and this one total about 3,024 acres, 0.81 acres, including ag, forest, 40, and 80. The next slide. This is the final, again, for the entire length of the railroad. This one is from north of the town of Yakult, UGA, to where it terminates at the Chelashi terminus. You can see again, if you maintain 500 feet on both sides of the railroad, that's the properties that will be impacted. and this one total about 1,802 acres or more, with a total of a little bit over close to 6,000 acres. If you maintain 500 feet of the railroad and all the properties that may be impacted. So when you're asking us to look for land for jobs, I don't know where the county council wants to limit that, or whether this will be extend to the entire length of the railroad. So I would like to get some clear direction in amending the RFP, what the council want us to do. And I'll stop there, and both of us, I myself and Jose are here to answer questions.
So from my point of view, and we'll hear from all the counselors, I mean, there's not a whole lot I can do about the timeline. It is what it is, and if that's as fast as it can be done, then so be it. But what we were talking about was basically double checking the data. It has nothing to do with any of these maps that you've just shown us from the buildable lands model, with basically an update, putting it into this contract because it is lands for jobs. It's the same topic. So one person looking at the FRDU can also take a look at where we're at currently, since some of this is now 2 years old, as far as the ground truthing of the GIS data. So that's what I thought we were going to talk about today, not only the timeline, which we just did, but also what language could we put in there. Basically, what I was suggesting, phase 0, that you just add to the scope of work, to have them update that data from the comprehensive plan. I get, all I get generally is, you don't want to do this. I got it.
No,
and,
sir.
you know, and I heard, you know, at length over and over by email and people coming in here, take a beat. Well, we have. It's been over 4 years since we've done anything with the FRDU. We had a deliberate pause from 2017, 2018 on. So we've taken a beat. Let's try to move forward. We have this grant, we have this money available that we put into the budget to help you plan the FRDU. I just wanted to propose that we expand that scope, same contract, expand the scope, and have whoever bids on it, that's a responsible bidder that we accept, could do not only the FRDU work originally included in the RFP package, but could also check the math and see that it's still current on buildable lands. So that's where I'm from as far as my one vote from yesterday.
And just as a reminder too, council did request the Railroad Advisory Board to also present information to council today for your discussion.
Before that
Okay,
occurs,
so-
I'd like to ask staff if they have
Go ahead, Karen.
language. Before getting to the advisory board, I'd like to ask staff if they have language to recommend that be added for this scope of work, which I thought was what we were asking for.
I have some questions as well, maybe
I'm
before we
sorry,
get to that.
is there an answer to that? I'm not sure.
I think Councilor Bowerman, from my perspective, we were looking to council today to describe what land for jobs meant and what outcome you're looking for, so then we can take that and put it into the RFP, because just saying land for jobs, I don't believe any consultant's going to know what does that mean, what's the expectation and the outcome. So having this discussion to understand where council is coming from, we can then now start thinking about, okay, what could that language look like?
And if I may, Councillor, with your indulgence, that's why I raised the same grant opportunity that CREDC was looking for, and that's why I cited that memo, that it is the same thing. So it would be proper to know if that is the same language that the council want us to put in this revised RFP, because to me, that's what Land for Jobs stands for, really, looking at potential industrial site in the county, including site located along the PGR Railroad. That, to me, is Land for Jobs. Secondly, if I may, I heard from the council that this is not about revisiting the VBLM. But listening to you, Councilor Chair, that's what this entails. I don't know what to put in the revised RFP, but maybe Councilor Marshall, I'll just shut up and have you ask us your questions.
Well, I can answer what to put in the RFP, but I would say I do think that things are inappropriately being kind of smushed together here. I thought I heard clearly yesterday vacant buildable lands was not on the table. I was not clear at all what Land for Jobs means. I know there was a previous report that was done by CREDC on Land for Jobs. And, you know, when FRDU is flawed from the get-go because the legislation was, in my mind, clearly does not allow water and sewer, urban services to be extended. So I think the 400 acres that the previous council approved the overlay was the best that could be done within the framework of that legislation. And that is from Vancouver to Battleground. And then it really is going to be just rural lands that'll be looked at beyond that. So I don't think that vacant buildable lands model is appropriate to bring up at this point. And I just really have questions about this whole process. This issue with the railroad is contentious. The community is, in many cases, is very alarmed about what is going to be proposed. That it's languished for so long has not added to that concern and fear of what's going to be developed along the railroad. There was an opportunity with this proposed consultant contract to take a step forward. I think at this point, in what's being proposed, it's going to throw things back. It'll delay things a good deal because now it gets wrapped up into the comp plan update. So I don't think we're even following what we initially decided as a council as the way forward some months ago. So I'm just disturbed by this process. I don't think it's appropriate. I think will bungle up whatever progress could have been made with the railroad and the overlay that's already been identified. And if there is, I know there's been a desire on the part of some council members and the Railroad Advisory Committee to expand beyond that 400 acres. But you have to go back to the legislature to correct that because we're dealing with a very flawed piece of law.
Okay, so you did vote no yesterday, so your vote really is irrelevant as far as whether you misunderstood or didn't as to what we were intending.
It was clearly stated.
I do want to say that this other contract with CREDC, if we ever get it, will be different. And if we would have put it in different terms, what we are doing is not reopening the VBLM, but we are double checking the math that underlies it, making it current. It is an incremental addition to the scope of work of what we agreed on originally. Again, Councilor Marshall voting against it. We get it. There are two councilors that don't want to move forward. So what we're looking for is a rechecking of the math on buildable land. It is related, whether it's within the urban growth boundary, or if we're going to add a whole bunch or have the opportunity to add a whole bunch outside with the FRDU. So they are related, and that's what we want to get a good picture of. So if we do get the CREDC grant and work done, it'll be additive, it'll be complementary It won't be opposition, it won't be different, it'll be complementary. So anyway, do we have further questions, or do we want to hear from the Railroad Advisory representatives?
If I could just ask a clarification, when you say recheck the math, just make sure we're all on the same page, what does that mean to you? Is it looking at GIS data? Is it looking at the vacant buildable lands model formulas or data on that? What do you mean by checking the math?
Quite frankly, it would be,
Time has passed by years. So what is the situation now?
So from what original data point? Was it from the VBLM from 2-3 years ago? What data point are you referencing that we passed from so that we know what math we're checking?
The most, I hear you, the most current updated, yeah, let them ask, I'll shut up.
In your estimation, what document shows the best portrayal of Lands for Jobs at the time that it was created? If that's the VBLM, then that would be a data point to start from and see where are we now after these years have gone by, because there has been quite a bit of development in Clark County.
So it sounds like it's the VBLM data that was approved, which was the look back, but would help determine future decisions.
And throughout the allocation process, the council may have forgotten, we were using 2023. That was the most recent run of GIS data, 2023. That was the basis for the allocation that was done. The buildable lands report that was submitted to the state was up to 2022. So the most current data that we are relying on in the allocation made to all the cities was based on 2023 VBLM run. And if I may add, none of the cities are objecting to that result. It's on record.
so before we continue hashing this out, because I'm sure there's going to be more discussion, can we hear from the advisory committee leadership? Okay, not hearing an objection, and they are present. If you could come forward, sir, and introduce yourselves and
Are we on? Sure. I'm Daniel Weaver, the chair of the Railroad Advisory Board for the past 20-plus years. And I'll let John introduce himself.
I'm John Schaefer. I'm the vice chair, and I've only been there 15 years.
All right, today we restricted our comments to things that we discussed yesterday, and one was if we had recommendations for people who could do a study of this nature. And I reached out to all the members of the Railroad Advisory Board that may have had contact with them. Some have had contact but had no really knowledge of the expertise of the people. So I reached out to Jeff Swanson, who was the prior Railroad Advisory coordinator for the railroad for Clark County, and he then became the economic development coordinator for Clark as well as the railroad. And he did significant work on the railroad activities, did a couple of studies for development of the line in terms of repairs, et cetera. And he also did some studies on what available lands there were for development of jobs. And those studies are available in the records of the county. One should be with the Rural Industrial Land Bank effort, and the other one, I can leave a copy of it. I could not find one for the railroad for jobs. This one is for the capital projects information. But he gave me 3 names of individuals who he felt were competent to do this either by themselves or in conjunction with partnering with another consultant to do the job appropriately. I believe 2 of these firms were on your list before that went out to. One I don't believe was, but I have the list, which I'll leave. I'll mention them right now. Todd Johnson with TRJ Planning, Chris Blankney with Echo Northwest, which I believe was on your list before, and Jerry Johnson of Johnson Economics. Those particular individuals were not addressed with the request for proposals that went out. According to what John looked at the list, and they went to other individuals in those firms, but they were in those firms. These might be the individuals to contact. And the other one that also comes up is HDR, which is, I believe, still has a local office here. They've done a lot of work for the railroad in the past, mostly the mechanical part of it, but they do have expertise in the railroad, maybe not as wide of expertise in the land development. The other thing that I wanted to bring to the attention, and John will give you more details on it, is the footprint of the approved property right now is a little over 300 acres of property, of which 60% or so of that property is Lagler owned or controlled property. And I reconfirmed this morning through a representative from Lagler, they have no intention of or cannot sell that piece of property for railroad development without selling the rest of their property or a substantial portion of the rest of their property, because they need every bit of their property to operate their dairy. I have reason to believe that Mr. Temple, the operator, believes that he has the ability to gain that property. My concern is that he may want to gain that property through eminent domain, which would not be a recommendation from this advisory board. Now I'll let John speak a little bit about the particulars of the property that's in the overlay.
Okay, yeah, because I went through and I pulled out every parcel that's covered, because I had heard 400 acres all the time, and when I got down, it was 303 acres. And then the Lagler property is 175 of that. So you end up with 28 acres. And if you just take the parcels that are 10 acres or more, that's only 100 acres out of 5 parcels. So there's 16 parcels left for 27 acres. That's 1.7. There's a bunch of little parcels in this. And if you remember, I'm sure you've all seen the CREDC reports for, people that are looking for rail-served property. They're looking for big parcels. And, the smallest one I ever saw was like 50 acres. And so when we're talking about, land for jobs and rail, I think one of the things they can look at is, okay, we know that we're not going to have the 50-acre parcels or the 100-acre parcels or the 200-acre parcels. So maybe they can look at what is the opportunities out there for rail-served properties on smaller parcels. Because we're looking at a different market here than what we've been looking at all the time. That's one of the reasons why when we did our presentation to you before about the bigger parcels, that was two reasons. One, it was to take the entire Lagler property because Dennis wants to go to Idaho. He says they like dairy farmers in Idaho. And when he fires up his manure big sprayers, the neighbors don't like him that much. The other thing is that we were looking for people that could come in and get 100, 200, 300 acre parcels that were rail served. So when you're talking about 400 acres, you're not going to get 400 acres. You know, you're going to get 100 acres divided by 5 parcels, and 3 of them are next to each other. And I was just out there today. They're horse ranches. One of them has a big, covered riding arena. But, so there's some development out there. But there are a lot of really nice houses out there too. So there's going to be issues on the 23 parcels. 14 of them have houses built on them. So there's challenges that when we did the community outreach, we weren't planning on that. So anyhow, I hope that gives you some information of, when you hire the consultant, that when he does the analysis, that he's looking at a different market than what CRDC has been proposing all these years, because the land we need that CRDC was proposing is not going to be available under this model.
And if I may add to that, when you have a small parcel like that, then it's likely to be divvied up, and it can be developed by the current operator of the railroad, and he would likely develop it himself, as opposed to having anyone else come in. If you had substantial amount of property, you could have a developer come in, and I have spoken with a leading real estate person who could put me in contact with many developers that would be interested in that. However, the market right now is not conducive to that because of the high interest rates and the fact that the economy is not as stable as it could be. The developers are putting their money into shoring up the developments that they already have in process. And he's indicated that the likelihood of a developer wanting to do anything there is probably 6 months to a year out, and probably dependent to some extent on what the election does in the fall.
Yeah. And also when you're trying to say things like this, you can't use a simplistic model of 500 feet. You got to pick an area and you got to study it. I mean, it's really easy on staff, 500 feet. You can. They did the entire railroad. Probably took an afternoon. But the thing is that you got to look at, everybody, knew that the Lagler property was not going to be available. Never should have been in here in the first place. That was thoroughly discussed in all of the meetings we had. You have to pick an area, you got to study it. And you don't put in little 0.9 acre parcels into it. Nobody's you can't put a siding on that. You can't have simplistic models for what are going to be very sophisticated developments.
The other thing that the operator can, he would make a fair amount of money because he would use the property himself for his own operations and the things that he's involved in now. And if you get a developer in there, they would come in and you could get some amenities out of it. You could get them to build some roads, build some crossings and other things in the property that wouldn't be available with a small operator making those changes.
Yeah.
Questions by counselors?
I have a couple of questions. Thanks for this information. It's good to know what the landscape looks like right now. It's changed. And it is sounding like that initial overlay kind of might be sort of moot at this point, or you're really looking at it differently as far as what could be developed there?
It never was a viable piece of property.
Never was, but you know, it was, as I recall things, it was all about the Lagler property, and it was the Lagler property that was identified for the Rural Industrial Land Bank, and which brought about this legislation. So you've blown my mind a little bit.
Well, and you know, there's some good-sized parcels out there. Of course, they're farmland. And I know that's part of your thing, so.
Right. So it does sound like maybe, you know, that I just don't know if that initial overlay is even viable at this point.
Which is exactly my point and why we should be looking at the entirety of the short line, not what we've already looked at in the past. But Karen, I thought you had invited the advisory team here. Did you have questions?
Well, obviously what you've said so far is huge and has answered many things I think that people were wondering about. I think if you could address the potential for jobs on the land surrounding the railroad, that would be instructive. And then if you have appropriate language to suggest for adding to the RFP, I'd like to hear that.
Well, the language for the RFP should include all the property, not just the property along right the railroad. So the legislature was left open for the county to decide what was adjacent and how they defined it and how it could be used. So the council has the opportunity to take in property that is there. I mean, the Lagler property is a prime example if you took in, and that was the reason for the development of the 1 mile radius from the railroad, excluding the parcelized areas, and basically nothing to the north and the west of the railroad it would be taken in because it's all highly parcelized with homes on it, some very nice homes, and the whole town community of Brush Prairie is in that area. Yeah. But so it would be all to the south or east of it, of the railroad, which includes the bulk of that property is all Lagler property. You could also exclude any parcelized items there. But that's a significant chunk of property that could be looked at. As you go up the line, you might find a 40-acre parcel that's adjacent to the railroad, but most of those are smaller parcels also. They're 20 and 30 acres or whatever, maybe up to 40, but some not much larger than that.
Yeah. And we're still talking about this between us because, you know, my feelings are that, you know, broad brush up the line is, you know, there's so many variables as far as, you know, the quality of the roads and, you know, I'd like to see the county pick a spot, say maybe Yackle. And okay, we got one spot down here, let's take the next spot and let's, you know, you have good roads up there, and is that a place we can develop? And not willy-nilly just going up the line. And we're still talking about it.
Other questions, Karen, Michelle, or Glenn?
So just to follow up on that, so given the 15, 20 years that you have had in thinking about this land, what potential do you see for the development of industry, corporations, small businesses, whatever, that could in fact bring jobs to the area?
Well, our indications are, both from the real estate and from Eric's experience in talking about it, that if you took a big chunk of property like the Lagler property in the Brush Prairie area, it would be one of the premier building spots for a railroad or an industrial park that's rail served. It would be one of the premier places on the east or on the west coast of the United States.
But what if we
But the operator,
don't have the Lagler property?
Say again?
What if we don't have the Lagler property?
Well, there's not many large parcels. I mean, there are a few 40-acre parcels outside the Lagler property, but not a lot of them, not real close to the railroad.
Even if you're looking at the distance of the railroad? Beyond
Well,
that.
there are some up north, but like I said, there's not a lot of properties that are controlled by one person. You'd have to get several people involved that want to sell their acreage up the line. But like I said, there's maybe a 40, could be an 80-acre parcel that touches the railroad, but you'd have to likely get several different people involved in selling the property.
and it's on a state highway. It's not on a county road.
Yeah, the Lagler property has access that obviously it needs to be upgraded, but it has access, road access in and out.
The other thing with the 500-foot deal is that even in this proposal, we have property owners that half of their property is in and half of their property is out. There's I think it's called the Railroad Industrial Urban Reserve. So there's a gentleman by the name of Cotton, and I think like 1/3 of his property is in and 2/3 of his property is out. So I don't know if he's going to want to put his 1/3 in if he can't use this of the 2/3. I'm not sure how that's going to work either.
I believe the Cottons are still actively farming.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's a lot of farming going on.
So I feel like we're kind of languishing here. One, we had, I thought, a fairly firm decision with at least the majority of us that we were going to, in an expedited way, reissue this RFP. And what I thought today was about was defining if we were going to change the scope, and if so, how we were going to change the scope of that RFP. I had proposed some specific language, just in brief, for phase 0, to have them double check. We have a little bit more granularity on what that may mean. Is it the VBLM data from 23 or 22? I'm not going to use the words we're opening up the VBLM model. We're just double checking the math to see if it's current today. I think it's a related issue, so can we focus on that? Otherwise, we still have half the meeting to go through today and some other presentations. Yes, sir.
Well, could I suggest maybe, for the charge for the consultant is, instead of, getting into the land for jobs, maybe he just produces a report of the employment potential for the land involved. Maybe do an analysis of what type of employment smaller industrial activities create, and project the type of employment that could be possible for these small parcels. And so you'll be able to see how much land you have and how much jobs you can get.
Any thoughts? Are we able to move forward, or are we just going to basically reissue the same RFP?
I think that's a good suggestion, the employment potential. Kathleen mentioned that Land for Jobs didn't communicate anything necessarily. I would think that employment potential certainly would.
I have a question, if I can, and Oliver may need to be the one that answer this, but I assume Councilor Bowerman with the employment potential along the rail line, because I think council just looked at employment projections as part of the comp plan update already. Oliver, am I correct in that? Just to make sure I didn't misspeak, because I know that that's part of, so if it's narrowing down that information down, Oliver, can you please confirm?
Yes, this is Oliver again. Yes, that would be, if it is potential employment or potential job along the rail line that is outside the current work that we've done with the VBLM.
That part of the comp plan update, wasn't there an employment projection that has already been
completed? Yes.
Already been approved by council and the cities?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to include that piece.
I have a question. I'm confused. I mean, you suggested just what remains that could be developable of the area that has the overlay. Is that correct?
For the area that has the overlay.
Is that, Chair, is that what you're looking at as well?
All along, had been proposing that we look at an overlay for the entirety of the short line. That's been my goal from the very start when I first started talking about this. Because we ultimately, once we have a fresh look at a professional consultant, they may come back and go, you know, that train has come and gone. There's nothing left. You know, between all of the constricted lands, parks, natural areas, waterways, there's nothing that would attract industry along your rail line. I mean, that could be an outcome. On the other hand, it may show us where to rezone, how much of what adjacent means, you know, what is possible. Otherwise, I mean, we're just kicking the can with no fresh look, no forward progress. I was hoping when Oliver first mentioned this, hey, we need a consultant for our comp plan update on the FRDU, it was like, hallelujah, maybe we can get a consultant in here to help us out. What's feasible? What's not? And the whole point of this is not to make Eric Temple rich or to give him land to develop. It is to attract family wage jobs, industry, business, not just put commodities on the railroad, but let's make the commodity here in Clark County. So that's what I was hoping we would do with this RFP. When the question came up with the building industry, hey, a lot of time has come by since you did the VBLM when we first approved it in 2022, and it's no longer valid. The county really needs to relook that. I thought the proverbial two birds with one stone, let's have one consultant look at this whole issue.
And yeah, and I do believe Oliver said that they updated those numbers in 2023 for VBLM, but just remember, you can certainly change direction, and we will do whatever direction or whatever council suggested, but the direction that council provided was to move forward with option 6 with the following exceptions: maintaining the definition of adjacency of 500 feet and adopting the current overlay map, knowing it could be reviewed in the future, and the consultant to now take that option 6 with those exceptions and figure out how can we do this, which is exactly what the RFP did and the response that we got. So certainly we can update and change that, but I don't want counselors or the public and staff, they have been moving this forward since council provided that direction, and they're continuing. That's why we're here. But if council wants to change anything, that's fine. And I'm also, you know, and I know, Chair, you'll get the conclusion from the counselors, because I'm hearing two pieces. I'm hearing data from the back and information from the future. So we look forward to that clarity from council.
I'm feeling a disconnect with what is the manner in which staff has gone forward. As I understood, they were looking now still at the 400 acre overlay. Is that correct? Because if that's the case, we just heard from the advisory board what happens with that 400 acre overlay. And it doesn't seem that it is land for jobs right now.
Yes, so they are looking at the current adopted overlay per council's direction. And believe me, I re-listened to all these discussions last week. So, and there was an intentional, I think from Chair Mevigi, about keeping the overlay map the same now, knowing in the future so that we can start getting these development regulations developed and implemented, that in the future it will be revisited at that time. So that was the discussion on August 16th.
Would you please put numbers on that? Were you talking about a 400-acre overlay at that time? Because if
Yes.
so, we've just heard that.
So Oliver, I know it says it's the adopted overlay map. Can you confirm that that includes 400 acres?
Yes, that is the 400 acres, and we shared with council that when we adopt the development regulations, that would apply when we extend that to other areas. So you don't have to do a new development regulation. That was the direction, and that was the position of staff, that you don't have to do another development regulation. Every time you expand this, whatever development regulation that the council adopt, that would be applied.
But we've just heard from the advisory board the nature of that 400 acres, and it doesn't make sense to count that all as land for jobs, does it?
Well, at this point, Councillor, the RFP had nothing to do with land for jobs. It was about developing the regulations under the freight rail dependent use so that that could be applied to any acres in the future for, council's use, which would include overlay adjustments. So that was not the focus of this RFP and direction. The focus was, let's get the draft freight rail dependent use regulations done, get the public participation done, get that in place so that we actually then can move forward, council can move forward with talking about development and application of overlay.
Chair?
May I speak?
Yes, please. Well, let me go to Councillor Young.
So, I really am uncertain at this point what is being asked for. I am really uncertain about what end results are being expected. And, it sounds to me like we're asking for a feasibility study, which should have been done a long time ago, long before we were talking about adopting regulations. But the reality is, we have this RFP in front of us. We allocated $100,000 for it. And if we're adding significantly to the scope of work, there are two things that need to happen. Either more money needs to be given for that additional scope of work, or you've got to gut parts out of what the scope of work currently is in order to replace it with the new. So I would be curious. I would love to hear a summary of exactly what outcome you're expecting from this additional language.
So let me just take a step back, Karen, because I remember when we first discussed this and I had first asked to do the whole rail line. I believe it was Karen Bowerman at the time as chair said, no, let's just do the overlay that we've got in place.
I thought that was you, sir.
Oh my God. So I adjusted my expectations and thought, well, if we at least approve that RFP and get a consultant to at least do the work for what we've already got an overlay for, that would be a map for the future, potentially. It would inform us whether or not it was feasible to move farther north or not. They may come back and say, there's just nothing left here. So you either look to the entirety of the railroad or you just let it languish and do nothing more. I think that's what I had expected. So right now, I don't want to change the RFP. I think that's a bridge too far, and I think we would need a whole lot more money to budget against it. What I was still hoping for is to reissue this RFP on an expedited way to see if we can attract other vendors and add a minimal adjustment on the scope to double check the Lands for Job data that was in place since 2022, just to get an update on it to see if it's still valid as part of this Lands for Job overarching initiative.
Is that just the
And that's what I thought we were doing today with the help of staff.
Yeah, so the
Was to
BLM,
translate that language into an RFP Phase 0 scope of work adjustment.
so an understanding, and Oliver, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not the 2022 data, it was updated in 2023, so, which was 6 months ago.
And I heard that 2023 date.
Yeah, and
But we actually approved it in 2022, and what the notion is that since 2022, the data is no longer valid. So that's why I was, as we were sitting here after Oliver's presentation, I was thinking, if we really want to double check the math, we really need to go back to 2022, not 2023. But I could be mistaken about that, and that's why you're here, Oliver.
Yes, Councillor, the 2022 data was looking back 5 years to meet the requirement of the buildable lands report because we are a buildable lands county. That was what was done when we hired Eco Northwest to help us in that effort. And I believe that the council at the time voted unanimously to the changes that was made to the model, including assumptions. And when the model was run in 2023, it was based on those directives from council. So the most current data is the 2023 data. And that was the basis for the allocation that was done, which we shared with the council. Now, what I was saying earlier is that the allocation that we made both on housing and employment, which you approved, was using the 2023 VBLM run as the base year. So the most current data, if you bring our GIS staff here, will tell you is the 2023, that's the most current data. And that was the same data, if I may, that we distributed to all our cities and to the public to comment on before we did the allocation. So asking someone to go revisit that data now is putting all that work, in my opinion, in jeopardy. Because we have completed the allocation using the 2023 information as the base. I'm just making this observation to our council. So whatever you ask whoever the consultant is going to be to do, we'll put that, if they come back and say there is very little or more, whatever the case may be, the cities will have to start scrambling all over again on what to do. Because you've already allocated housing number to them, you've allocated employment number for them to plan for, and they're using the data, 2023 data to do. If you're going back to the 2022 data, that is reassessment of the buildable lands report that we submitted to the state. If you recall, in one of my comments, I said to the cities and to the public, that was a GMA action. If there is nothing wrong with that, appeal. No one appeal.
So you've won the day, at least with me. I retract my 22 reference. I forgot that it went back 5 years, but go ahead, Karen.
2022 and 2023 both used 400 acres for the land around the railroad for jobs, right? So what's the difference?
That wasn't just looking at the rail line, that was looking countywide. Go ahead, Oliver.
We're not looking countywide. We're looking around the railroad only right now.
The railroad is outside. I can come and sit down.
Oliver, you can come stay here. Oh, you got it.
Because if we're looking only around the railroad and the number hasn't changed, I don't know why we are arguing over the year.
Councilors, if I may again, this is Oliver. The railroad, this 400 acres, is outside the urban growth boundary. The model does not look at rural areas. We've made this very clear to the council. So the 400 acres was not looked at as part of the BLR that was done in 2022. It was not looked at as part of the 2023 VBLM run.
So if
It's
it
outside
wasn't
the
in
urban
either
growth boundary.
one, if it wasn't in either one, then probably the year makes no difference. So let's just say that we're looking at that 400 acres that had been designated for the land for jobs around the railroad and take it from there. I don't understand the reasoning beyond that.
My question is, again, what are we being asked to look at the 400 acres?
What is actually available? And we've gotten a report now from the Railroad Advisory Committee on that. And if that is all that there is available, then what does the county do in order to develop jobs around the railroad, which is our goal, right? For employment purposes and utility of the railroad.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor, whatever jobs or whatever land is designated for with the overlay, that job is going to be calculated in the rural area. Because when we are sizing the urban growth boundary, just like population, the council will have to make a determination on how much of that new growth should we allocate to the urban area and how much should we allocate to the rural area. Recall what I said earlier. The vacant buildable lands model does not extend to the rural area. However, we do allocate jobs to the rural area, whether it's home occupation, whether it's home business, we do allocate jobs to the rural area. So when this 400 acres developed, assuming it's not brought into the UGBA in the future, that whatever that job creates is going to be assigned to the rural area because that's where those properties are located. I hope I'm answering your question.
Chair?
Karen, did that conclude? Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, so I would like to get a clarification from Oliver. So my understanding is that the 400 acres, because it's in the rural area, was counted as part of VBLM as just plain old rural area and not anything parcel specific or like with a higher employment density or anything like that. Is that correct?
That is correct. Because the land is outside the urban growth boundary, we are not included in any allocation within the UGA.
So if we were to look at this and then go back and change the numbers, it would actually show that the current amount of land that we have would support more jobs than we currently think it does. Is that correct?
If it is zoned properly, because right now all it has is an overlay. It's not commercial, it's not industrial, it just have an overlay in the rural area. If it is zoned for commercial, we will assign 22, whatever number of jobs is available, we will assign 22 units to an acre to whatever is developable. If it's industrial, we assign 9. However, because this is outside the urban growth boundary, we did not assign any employment to it at this point because it's not zoned properly. It is still zoned agriculture.
Thank you. I mean, that answers. So I'm kind of hearing something from Councilor Bowerman and something from Councilor Mebaji, but Gary, were you requesting that the entire county be looked at for for land for jobs, or just the section on the rail, or just the overlay?
This RFP is just for the railroad. The CREDC grant is for the entire county. So, council, we still have other business to do. Do you still want to go forward and reissue the RFP? I guess I should ask that in an expedited way. We voted 3 votes yesterday to do that. Are you still wanting to do that? I'm not sure where this conversation's going.
I'm not sure that the outline that was presented is expedited at all with a start date of November. So the discussion yesterday was for an expedited approach, but I haven't seen one today.
And unfortunately, part of that is due to legal processes that we have to follow for notices.
Well, it's legal, sure, but to take a month up front and to take 6 weeks for there are parts built in that surely could be done more quickly than they are here. I mean, each step, yes, is a legal step, but wow, does it ever take a long time?
Yes, so, and I'll reiterate what Oliver already said too, is we can prioritize this when it closes. Last time, we didn't have anything when it closed, so we had to extend it. So that's out of our control. The other thing that's out of our control is the timeline and the number of times that we have to notice it. And then if there's questions and answers and addendums, there is actually quite a bit. The review side, we can prioritize that and get that done timely, but there are a lot of legal pieces that we can't change, unfortunately.
I think the unfortunate thing that I see is just in terms of an overview of where we're headed as a county, is to say Clark County is not open for job development, and forget it if you want to be near the railroad. So that is not the message that, as I see the vision for Clark County, that I have. Let me put it that way. I don't know if that's the vision that other counselors have or not, but it's not the one I have, that we're closed.
I know you're asking counselors. Staff doesn't, they agree with the vision that council has, which is why we did this RFP and it was in front of you. Council's requesting a change on that. That's a change. That's not staff direction. So I don't want anybody on staff to be accused of not supporting what council's direction is with regards to this RFP, railroad jobs for land, because that is not the intention.
I don't know who said that or where that came from. If it came from me, that's incorrect. I'm just saying that I feel like this discussion as a whole has gotten to the point that Clark County is closed for business around the railroad. And I'm not suggesting who did anything there, Kathleen, so I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Be that as it may, what do you want to do today? Are we going to give staff direction? I mean, expedited is a relative term. We kind of fell short with Vancouver's request for their bridge funding as well when we first looked at expediting an RFQ process for that. It is what it is. I mean, all I can ask is that the executive, with all alacrity, stays on top of it and gets it done as quickly as possible. I would like to see the RFP go out again. I had proposed that we expand it to double check the numbers, to have a fresh view with whoever responds to this RFP, to look at the 2023 VBLM data to see if it's still current. And we'll hope and see what happens with CREDC, which would give us a county-wide view of an industrial potential.
I supported that yesterday. I do today, based on the inputs that we have had, particularly from the advisory committee.
Chair Mevaji, can I ask a question too? Just reviewing the VBLM numbers from 2023, does that impact anything with the comp plan update and decisions that have already been made?
To be honest with you, I can't speculate, but I believe it will.
Okay. I just want to make sure council has all the information before that.
But you're not talking county-wide, are you, Chair?
So I'm not real clear, Karen, on where your vote is today, and I haven't heard a word from Michelle.
But I have a question of you first. You are not speaking of county-wide review of the VBLM, are you?
Yes.
You are?
I was all along.
Okay. I did not understand that. I understood it to be relative to the FRDU implementation.
I'm
I have
hoping
a
we
comment,
can connect those dots. That's once we get a consultant validation, one of whether or not there's buildable land along the railroad that can be developed and attract jobs, how that would impact overarching plans for the county to attract jobs, and double check the VBLM data from 2023. It's all an overarching, I mean, some of the, within the urban growth boundary, outside urban growth boundary, obviously we hear from different groups that have different ideas on where our focus should be. You know, we don't focus out in the rural county. The FRDU does. And if we're going to take a holistic approach to job creations over the next 20 years for our comp plan, we should include that opportunity. Michelle, I'm sorry, I talked over, I heard you started to talk.
Yeah, Kathleen, I understand the procurement, having it advertised as long as it needs to be based on Washington State procurement law. But is there any way that we could incentivize the contractor to perform at a faster pace? Is that possible, or has the county ever done a contract like that?
I think we just put the scope of work, and then they tell us how they're going to implement and the timing that happens. But I am not aware of other type of incentives that we have done before.
Okay, because I was just wondering if you could just make up for some of the time.
Chair, just listening to the discussion today, it seems to me that what was voted on yesterday has morphed into something else today related to the vacant buildable land. And, you know, I don't know what the procedure is if now we're acting on something that actually is different than the majority of the council supported yesterday.
Thanks for that. But I've used lands for job. My ideas haven't morphed at all. I'm still trying to see if I have 3 votes left to do what I think is the right thing to do with this RFP. And so where are we at? Okay, there's 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up.
So to clarify, this is for the entire county, re-looking at the data for the 2023 VBLM numbers, understanding that if those numbers change, there could be implications to the comp plan update in pieces that have already been approved by council.
I think that's exactly what we're hearing from the community, from the building community. You need to double check you need to be current. You need to know the assumptions and numbers that you have are still currently valid. Otherwise, this is a ridiculous exercise.
Yeah, and the,
So that
the city's
it's basically a double check, yes.
if it comes back different though, that may lead to future litigation regarding the comp plan update. So I just want to make sure council knows that there is risk with doing this for countywide. And we'll have to go back to cities and try to figure out how do we do this and not get in trouble for the comp plan update.
Well, hopefully it'll validate everything staff and all the community has done so far. Okay.
Councillors, here's my parting word for whatever it's worth. I think the conversation council should be having is inviting Clark Regional Wastewater to come and talk to you. That's my parting word. Because at the end of the day, there are opinions on one side of the ledger and another opinion on another side of the ledger. And what is that opinion? That opinion is that the bill as it's written doesn't allow sewer. I don't want to interject that here, but I want to put that as a parting word. Because no matter what we do, if we don't resolve that issue, this is all for nothing. That's my parting word.
Okay, don't be frustrated. We're all in this together, and we're hoping to move forward with this RFP and get some valuable information back. That'll be useful.
All of,
I want to be very professional, but I resent anyone alleging that staff is stolen, not my staff and not me.
it was mentioned at the beginning of the discussion by a counselor. So I would echo that with Oliver, and he is a professional, and he will continue to be part of our team.
I'm sorry.
We need to move on from this, but we will draft some language though, and I'll probably bring it back to council, but.
Okay. I guess I missed something as to why there's hard feelings.
Yes, because there was a counselor during the beginning of this meeting that accused staff of trying to stall this. So we just need, it's fine. We're not, I know council is not, and I know that was said, it was not the intention. But we need to be mindful of ourselves.
Whoever heard that, it's interesting that neither the chair nor I heard that, but somebody somewhere did. And so don't take it to heart.
I actually did hear it, and if you would like, after this is recorded, I will find the timestamp and send it to you.
You know, you're welcome to do that. However, I don't think it's important to dwell on that. I think it's important to move away from that, because if you picked up on that, I didn't, the chair didn't, let's just ignore that and move forward in a positive way. Let's find the positive in this for the county.
Okay, so I think we've about covered the subject for today, and hopefully everything will be positive and valuable in the future. Once we get a consultant on board, hopefully we have someone to respond. So we're going to move to the conservation covenant at Heritage Farm, which I know some people have been waiting to this really interesting meeting.
Chair, could I just take a 2-minute break quickly?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, 2 minutes for a quick rest stop as staff gets set up. Okay. Looks like we're all back after a brief break. Rocky.
Yeah, I just want to start really quick before Rocky does. I know that this was brought up last week during a meeting, and there were some questions about the conservation covenant. I want to make sure that council knows and the public knows this is not due to Rocky. He actually did submit a memo with recommendations to come forward quite a few months ago. Unfortunately, that memo didn't get to me or council, so there was a hiccup in that process, but I just want to acknowledge, I know when Rocky made a comment of, well, county manager, I was like, what are we talking about? Because I hadn't seen it. So I want to make sure that you all know that it was out of Rocky's hands, and we're here today to move forward.
Thank you. For the record, Rocky Houston, Parks and Lands Division Manager here in Public Works for Clark County. Before you is a memo and a topic that is a continuation of prior work in regards to the addition of a conservation covenant at 78th Street Heritage Farm. At the last council work session or council time, there was a question about a third party that would be holding this conservation covenant. There was a concern from that with the county holding it and giving it to itself, that a future council could undo that. So we investigated and looked at that. We identified some potential partners and identified some potential perceived or real conflicts with those partners given current relationships with the county. In addition, looking at the old I can't even think of the name, but the pros and minuses, again, with those organizations, we don't know who their future boards are, their directions, and as such, that does create another unique wrinkle for the county in the future councils. So in addition, we looked at legacy lands. We thought we had something that was clear there. We knew it had been looked at several years ago by staff previously when the PA reviewed it, identified that the RCW that governs the Legacy Land or Conservation Futures Program does allow council to change those rules in the future, such as that the current ideas that we had that would secure that in perpetuity and create a conversion issue if there was any change could be removed by a future council. As such, the recommendation from staff is to keep the current covenant as was proposed previously. We've attached that and the resolution today if there is action to be decided. I know there was a public comment in regards to Hazeldale Community Park. That is part of the historic district, but is not included in this conservation covenant. There was a request to consider adding that. From my perspective, there is a master plan that covers that acreage in that community park, and the historic district overlay covers that. So any future actions at the park would be restrictive by those overlays already. If council did want to do that, we would need to amend the covenant to include the master plan as the land use document for the community park, Hazeldale Community Park. And with that, I'm open for any questions you may have today.
Questions by council?
So thank you, Rocky, for this. So this would be held by the county, and a future council could change it if need be. And then the question is whether or not to include Hazeldale Community Park as well. Has there been any public comment related to including Hazeldale Community Park?
In the past, no, but there was one that did come through in the last day or two from a former Heritage Farm Advisory Team member and a former Historic Commission member. I believe he served on both those roles in the past. And he was making the point that the Poor Farm included those additional acres that is now the park, and that the covenant should cover all of those properties.
Great.
To be consistent with the historic overlay.
Thank you. I think that would be important to include so that it's consistent with the historic overlay. And as I was thinking about this, I wonder, if there is any concern about a future council and, a majority of 3 being able to change it, if we could include something that could be a supermajority or a unanimous decision on the part of the council, just to add a little additional protection. Just a thought.
As to the additional elements for the covenant that would include a supermajority or some reference there, I will have to turn it over to the PA's office on that.
And I would have to ask Kevin McDowell from my office, who has worked on this.
I think he's trying to speak now.
Kevin, was that you?
That was me, yes. I was trying
Okay, we can hear you.
I don't think you can. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the answer to that is no. The only the county itself would be the holder of the covenant. So all it's going to take, is a majority of the council. There's no way to require a future council to, that's like, no. The short answer is no. I mean, there's no charter requirement that could be relied upon to invoke such a requirement. There just would be no basis for such a requirement.
Thank you.
Counselor, if I may, for over 100 years, I think in 1923, your predecessors had thought about the same idea. When the administration building had burned down and they're looking about building that building that we do now have, should we consider an alternative use? And for 100 years, the county and the residents here have said no. And so I would just say, is looking in the rearview mirror, history, it predicts the future. I think we have strong advocates that would continue to let you or future counselors know no. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. I agree with that about strong advocates and that assurance.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. To me, I think this really would be sufficient. I think it would be, it's one thing. I know we have gotten a lot of information from our constituents about moving forward with something like this, but I can only imagine if a council in the future tried to remove that covenant, that it would be exponentially bigger, the public response to that. So I feel like this is a good solution.
Other comments or questions? My comment is this: I want to leave a mark. And the only words I would like to add to this is in perpetuity of this conservation covenant to be in the public interest in perpetuity. Just, it puts a marker in the sand, and it would make it, even if there's some council in the future that wants to be so bold to industrialize Heritage Farm, this would facially be an impediment. And I think we should do it. I think there's no legal instrument that will always guarantee that it won't change in the future, but I would like to see us do it. And I know it may be redundant language, but I would like to add the language in perpetuity, just to make it clear that we're not doing it just for today because it's in our interest, public interest today, but we think it's in our public interest for all time. So anyway, other comments, questions?
I just say I agree with that. So with the addition of the Hazeldale Community Park and perpetuity, I think we're good.
And just a point of clarification, if we do add Hazeldale Community Park, we will need to reference their master plan as that land use document as well. So that'd be additional text we'd need to add.
Yeah, and we had talked about it before the meeting, or during our brief break before the meeting. I thought that one email that we received was directly on point, and the whole parcel should be protected. I mean, we are making decisions today not to go in different directions for either the park, its annexation of some of Heritage acreage, and of Heritage Farm itself. So if you want to make, do we have a resolution number?
This would have to come back at a Tuesday meeting for final approval, so we can add it to the next Tuesday meeting.
So if you want to make that as a motion to make those 2 amendments to this draft resolution?
Do we need a motion, or is a thumbs up good enough for?
A thumbs up from the majority.
So I have a thumbs up on those two changes.
So do I.
Or looks unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And thank you. This is my last meeting, I believe.
Oh, my gosh.
So I just want to thank you for your
no.
guys' dedication and engagement and thinking of the individual resident here in the county as well as county-wide and the implications. So it's been a joy. And
Well, I felt like we should have had some cake or something, but thank you. And I think this is a great way to say goodbye at your last meeting to accomplish this. Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you, Rocky.
Okay, so move through that one a little bit more quickly. Number 5, new business, September 3rd, council meeting.
This is just asking council to cancel that particular meeting. It's the Tuesday after Labor Day, but the reason is we're getting our upgrades in the hearing room for the mics and so you can hear better. Our council time meetings, just so that you know, will probably be in 698 because we cannot use this room or the room next. So we will make sure that that's posted accordingly, but not being able to do CBTV on that day is the reason why we're asking to cancel the Tuesday meeting.
Yeah, and this kind of makes real, I know some people out there thought there were false claims of we not being able to hear in the room, but it's true of every organization that's ever been in here. If you have people calling in from outdoors, you could hear yourself perfectly well. You can hear yourself on the recording perfectly well. But the audio package in here was awful. And so it's a real concern. And I'm glad we're finally going to have some improvements. I'm in favor of canceling the September 3rd. Other thumbs up? Okay, there's 3, 4, 5, unanimous. Okay, moving on to 5.2, courthouse grant letter. Jordan.
Good afternoon, councilors. This is Jordan Bogey, policy analyst. I am pinch hitting for Michelle Schuster today. And this is a request for thumbs up for them to send in a grant application letter for county courthouse rehabilitation. And so the grant would be from the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation. And basically they are looking to remodel the interior of the courthouse to accommodate the needs of Superior Court while preserving the historical look of the interior and the exterior. And so basically, you know, they're seeking approval of the council to send the letter. And this is actually a program grant that's been accepted before. It was accepted in 2012, and since then the courthouse has been added to the National Register of Historic Places, the Washington Heritage Register, and the Clark County Heritage Register. And so I thought that was pretty cool, something I learned in the process of looking this over. So I'll try to answer any questions you have or would accept thumbs up or down.
The only question I had when I first saw this is the other Vancouver City courthouse that we're moving our family law court into, is that on the same registry? Is it not a?
I don't think that the old City Hall building is on the registry because they've redone that completely, that building, and district court's moving there. Okay. Yeah.
I was just looking for some additional grant money if available. Thumbs up? Yes, Glenn, you had a question?
Yes, thumbs up. I just want, I'm sure this is probably a draft, but there's a few errors in the second to the last paragraph on that page. There is the first page, the second to the last paragraph. Let me see here. There, it's has to do with the county. Yeah, the Clark County Council has approved, or either that the Clark County councilors have approved. And then there's also, there's one other error that's similar to that. But then also I think that when it was being drafted, a sentence that starts with "we appreciate," it should have been I think two things may have gotten put together. It should be, we appreciate the fact that the cost of the space planning and remodeling of the historical courthouse can be considered as the county's matching contribution. It's, I think, what was intended to be there.
Uh-huh. I can certainly pass those along to Michelle, and we can make sure that those tenses agree in the letter.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
So, was that a thumbs up from you then? With
Yes.
those? Thank you. All right. Thank you, Jordan. Councilor reports. Am I hearing a voice from somewhere? Glenn, did you have a councilor report? I just saw your mic come on.
No, I didn't. I have kids playing in the background. I've got to close the door. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's what I was hearing. I thought I was hearing things. Okay, no councilor report. Work session request 7.1.
Yes, the first one is the East Fork Reconnection Project. Public Works is asking for about an hour. They've been working in cooperation with the Lower Columbia Estuary on this project, and the final design is completed. They would like to bring that forward to council before they start the construction and access agreement.
I think that would be great.
Will it include the RCO combination with the estuary at that airfield, or is that considered a separate project?
I'm not sure. I think this is regarding the Ridgefield Pits area.
Okay, well, this
So
is,
it could
this
be
is right
part of
across
that.
the river
I
from
can-
the Ridgefield Pits.
I can follow up with staff unless Amber knows.
Anyway, I'm in favor of it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and
And then
Karen
the-
and Glenn.
Thank you. And then the second one is the Stormwater Capital Plan for 2025 to 2020 or 2030 for about 30 minutes in October. This is just an update regarding the Stormwater Capital Program and priority and planning. And this does come back to council for adoption in November. It's an annual.
Okay, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, unanimous once again. And back to you, Jordan, for a letter of support for hate crimes hotline pilot.
Yes. Thanks, council, again. For the record, Jordan Bogie. So there was recently a bill passed in the last legislative session, Senate Bill 5427, and what it did was set up a statewide hate crimes hotline that is to be implemented by 2027. As a precursor to that, they are setting up pilot hotlines in 3 counties, King County, Clark County, and Spokane County. And they got money from the state to set up the hotline. They did not get money to do outreach to basically market the fact that this hotline will now exist. And so the Attorney General's office is seeking a letter of support, which you see in front of you, to request a grant funding from the Federal Department of Justice to support funds. They would use those funds to hire a consulting firm or marketing group, basically to advertise the fact that this exists and get this information out to the vulnerable groups who would most benefit from it. And so they sent over a template, and I drafted this letter based on the template that they sent. And so I would look for any thoughts or edits or thumbs up from council.
So I think we're fortunate to be one of the pilot, and I think it's a good idea. The problem is, if no one knows about it, it won't be very effective. So the outreach portion of it is tremendously important. And this isn't going to cost, at least in initial meetings with the state representatives, it's not supposed to cost us anything. They're going to provide their own building, they're going to provide their own hotlines, they're going to man it, they're going to do it, and that's in perpetuity as far as I know, as long as they have the program in place. So anyway, I fully support signing the letter. I'm hoping others agree.
I agree. I think it's important to make it successful.
Okay, I see Karen thumbs up, Michelle, Glenn, Okay, unanimous once again. Thank you, Jordan, for working on this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Council. And if you don't mind, I do have just a couple of extremely quick policy updates for you that we didn't have on the agenda. The first is that last week, the press release to ask for a resident that lives near the Larch Correctional Facility went out. I did send that out to Council, and that press release has been released publicly, but just wanted to say for you again and for the public record that if there is someone who lives near the Larch Correctional Facility and would like to be on that task force to think about what the future looks like, we are accepting those applications now. They are due on July 10th, and then hoping that we can have Council make a selection either on the 16th or 17th of July, hopefully in advance of, it sounds like we have a few applicants already, which is good. Michelle is collecting them. In advance of the first meeting, which is planned for the week of July 22nd. They haven't scheduled it formally yet, but that's when that will be. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. And then also let you and the community know that the mental health sales tax RFP is scheduled to be released this Friday afternoon. And so I know there has been quite a lot of interest throughout the community services, the Community Foundation. A lot of different groups have done a lot of work to advertise this resource throughout the community. And so I just wanted to let folks know that starting Friday, folks will be able to review the RFP and begin the application process.
Will we be sure and let the City of Vancouver know?
Yes, we will be sure to let the City of Vancouver know.
So I don't know how easily retrievable it is, but once Corrections had announced Larch going dark, we did have at least one constituent, I think in my district, it may have been yours, email about what are they going to do about snow plowing my road? Because he was one of the few residents that were right out there. And Public Works did respond. Ken later basically said, geez, we hadn't thought about that. We'll think about it. But he would be a good candidate, or his neighbors, for this committee. I don't know if we can retrieve and find who that constituent was that was concerned about Larch closing. But anyway, it's just an idea.
Yeah, well, I'll look for it. I saw all the emails.
Okay. All right, so we have 3 executive sessions, 10 minutes each. The first one is under RCW 42.30.110, paren 1, paren G, for 10 minutes with possible after action. In fact, all 3 have possible after action. The next 2 are under 42.30.110, paren 1, paren little I. Again, each for 10 minutes. So approximately half an hour. Our best guess would be we'll come back here at 10 minutes, oh my gosh, before 4. This has been a long afternoon. If we can stay on schedule. So 3:50. We'll be in recess from this meeting. Let's get into executive session together with the lawyer. Okay, we're back in session. We had our executive session together with the lawyers. And are there any motions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I move to appoint Jeanette Bader and Morgan Fraser to the Historical Preservation Commission.
I'll second that. Okay, we have a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, here, Glenn's on board. Did you hear the motion, Glenn? I know you were just
Yes.
logging on.
Yes, I did.
Okay, and did you vote aye as well?
Correct.
Okay, so that's unanimous. Motion carries. We stand adjourned.